Well, good evening, my friends. I'm Erica Lukes. Happy to be here on a Friday night in Salt Lake City. I hope you're all safe and happy and riding out this current wave of COVID that seems to be wreaking havoc all over Utah. I've spoken with many people over this past week who have come down with COVID, and I just hope that all of you are safe and being smart and wearing a mask and getting a vaccine. I know that's very political to open up, even though it shouldn't be. It's just a matter of public safety and caring about fellow human beings. There you have it. I am Erica Lukes, and I love being here with you every Friday night. You can follow me on UFOclassified.com. You can also help support the show by going to UFOclassified.com and becoming a Patreon. I think right now I have almost enough money from my wonderful supporters to pay for the show costs. And so one of these days it will be wonderful if we can get a little more support and then actually help for some of the archiving and things that are really critical to this subject. As most of you know, I have a wonderful archive here, one of the best in the United States. I have been working with my friend Barry Greenwood, with Jen Aldrich, with Gordon Lohr, Alice Druffel, Rich Vitello, Keith Chester, some of the wonderful people that have helped me with this archive. And they have had enough faith in me that they trust me to preserve history. And most of you who listen to the show, well, hopefully all of you that listen to the show, you know how important Barry Greenwood specifically is to me because he is my mentor. I get to hear lots of wonderful stories from him about people in the UFO field, in the past subjects, some of these like really amazing old cases that nobody's ever heard of. And it's just, for me, it's the biggest pleasure of my life, I think, one of the biggest, to actually learn about all of this. And it is so important. It is so critical that we preserve the history, but not only that, we make it readily available for the public so you don't have to relive things like MJ-12, so you don't have to go down the Serpo rabbit hole or the underground bases in Dulce, some of these things that are just complete nonsense that the usual suspects have seeded into the community and younger generations keep buying. And I just want to say, anyway, that's my spiel, but hopefully we will get, we will get history out there to all of you. I want to thank all of you for being here, and I love looking in chat and seeing Magnus and Shadowy Spectrums, Ken, Alien Girl, Annie, all of you. I want to give a shout out to Irv, who is no doubt listening, and I hope you are well, and I hope you are painting, my friend. And I want to say thank you to Mario, who has been my biggest supporter over the years, and held my hand when I needed it. He is here behind the scenes. He has done a great job helping UFO Classified. So on that note, I want to just say that we're going to add Linda Miller Costa to the show. And Linda, even though it says Cheryl, we know that you're Linda because Cheryl is sitting over on the side of you, which I love. I'm so excited to have both of you here. I'm excited to talk with you. And I want to just say that, of course, I've got this lovely little ditty right in front of me. And this is one of the most important things that really, truly we've seen in the UFO subject, because this is the only time when we've actually analyzed data like this. That is an incredible book. I'm here with Linda Miller Costa, who is a career scientist. If I could speak English, I would be so excited. But Linda has a BA in psychology from Case Western Reserve University and a library science master's from the University of Maryland. She was head librarian, which is really, really cool, and I can't wait to talk about this, in the Toxicology Library, the Environmental Protection Agency for 15 years. And that in and of itself, I could have a show and not even talk about UFOs. With some of that, it's incredible. And then you became, after a career in scientific research and publishing in Washington, D.C., she is currently at Moyne College Library in Syracuse, and then she's co-author of this wonderful book, the UFO Sightings Desk Reference, United States of America, 2001, 2015. And you are married to Cheryl, who is sitting behind you. We saw her hand. And is a lovely, lovely person. First of all, I want to say thank you for your nice Christmas card. That was very kind of you. I really appreciated that when I was going through kind of such a dark chapter in my life, to get the mail and to open that up and to see your kind wishes. That really meant a lot to me, so thank you. So, what trouble are you girls up to?
Well, by the way, I am retired. I'm no longer working at Moyne College, so I retired back in December. So I'm enjoying that so far. And Cheryl's giving me a little rest before we start our next project is to do a data book for each of the 50 states, and then one for each of the 29 different types of shapes. So that after that, she promises me I can stop doing UFO books. So we shall see. But that's going to take at least a couple years, I think.
That is incredible. And I have to ask you, because I know that there are people listening tonight that haven't heard, you were on the show a while back, but we weren't doing video, and so I've got a whole new audience. Will you just tell us a little bit about your incredible background? And then I want to find out more about why you got into the UFO topic.
Well, actually, I first got the UFO topic when I was living here in Cleveland. I was about 20 years old, and a friend of mine, her brother, saw a UFO, and he was talking about it, got dragged off to talk to NASA and the Air Force, and he was just out of the Navy, and so he knew what planes looked like, and this was not a plane. And after being debriefed by the Air Force, he was told not to discuss it anymore. So Cleveland was an area that there was a lot of UFOs coming, because it's by a lake, et cetera, that they have a lot of sightings. So I, had been interested in this over the years. How I got into this particular project after I left Cleveland, after I graduated from college, and went to the bright lights and big city of Washington, D.C., because I'd always been fascinated by politics, and I wanted to live in someplace, large. I wasn't ready for New York City, but Washington, D.C. was the next best thing. And there, after various library jobs, I was at the National Academy of Sciences. I started as a secretary, and when they found out I knew how to do bibliographies and research, they put me to work doing that instead. And one of the things I was proud of is that I worked on the original biodiversity book. Wow. So I worked for the man that came up with the name biodiversity. I wanted to be an environmentalist. I had done a air pollution study when I was 13 years old here in Cleveland, and made it to the science fair in downtown. So I was working for the environmental and toxicology department in the National Academy of Sciences. The National Academy of Sciences has one research arm, is the National Research Council. And basically it got real quiet all of a sudden. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. The National Research Council is whenever the government has a topic or a problem that is too controversial for the government because the government, when they have meetings, they have sunshine laws and they're required to, let the public have access. Well, they can boot it to the National Academy of Sciences, and because they're private, they don't have to allow the public in, so they can do this research and deal with controversial scientific issues in private. And so it was a privilege. I saw, Nobel Prize winners, et cetera, at work. But I also learned out the inside of how science worked, and it's political as any place else. At that point, I decided if I wanted to go any farther, I was advised, go get your master's degree. So I went part-time and got my master's degree. And I said, well, what kind of career do you want? I said, well, I'd like to be the head of an environmental library. First job out of graduate school, I became the head of an environmental library. I was extremely lucky, although I was sort of confused. Well, where do I go from here? So I worked as a contractor at the Environmental Protection Agency, and we supported the researchers. I helped the speech writers for the department heads, that type of thing. We did research. We were there. We took the EPA from Gopher through, the internet, through the World Wide Web to pages, et cetera. And so they had that whole transition during the 90s of having to keep up with the technology. Our job was sort of to explain it to them. But one of the things that, just to get to the UFOs, okay, when I met Cheryl, and she's probably already told her story how she got into it. But what I contributed is she was writing this column for the Syracuse New Times, UFO. What was it? Night Sky, New York skies. I'm bad with remembering things. New York skies. And one of the things she did was that she did a little statistical analysis of something and published that, and it was popular. And then we went to the UFO IARC that you were at, and a professor, Dr. Gordon Spears from Riverside in California, came up to us and asked if she could do a statistical analysis of New York instead of just, part of New York. And so she did do that. It was a lot of work, and it was very hard because nobody had done this before. Because it was taking two databases, MUFON's database and Newfork's database, and putting the two together so we had a complete picture. So this was, so we were talking about, and I says, well, maybe we should do the whole United States. And my reasoning behind it was that I had worked on a project called environmental epidemiology. The environmental field is where the ufology is right now. Environmental field back in the 80s and 90s, no one had a degree in environmental studies. It didn't exist. I mean, I had a degree in psychology. One guy, had a French degree. I mean, it was just, you just sort of got into it through your personal interest. There was nobody who was qualified. There were biology PhDs, et cetera, that sort of thing. And the environmental epidemiology traditionally is looking at the incidence of diseases, like typhoid, typhus, et cetera. They figured out that it was the contaminated water. The way they did it is they looked at where people were getting sick, looking at geographically, which was a new idea. The most famous one in the environmental field is that one of certain chemicals cause certain disease and cancers, and one of them is leukemia in children is sort of a canary for toxic chemicals. Wow. And so they saw in upstate New York, there were a lot of children that were getting leukemia, and they were all clustered in one area, and that area turned out to be Love Canal. And that's how they identified that Love Canal was causing the problems, that there had been toxic chemicals that had been buried there. And then they, paved it over and built a housing community there where the children were exposed to it all. And so what about using this idea to look at UFOs? Because everyone had been studying UFOs from a case study standpoint, Roswell, Rendlesham Forest, whatever. And I says, and as a science librarian, you always you learn how to approach the subject that you're researching from very different ways. If you can't find it looking at it one way, you say, well, how else can I approach the subject? Because our goal is to find the information, and you do what you need to do to find out where it is, because things are not as organized as people think they are. When I was in library school, one of my things I remember most is just because you want a statistic doesn't mean it exists. And that's what people don't understand, is they think, oh, can't you just tell me how many people do this? No, because if somebody hasn't been investigating and recording it, you can't find it.
Right. Yeah, you would think.
And the people that do the most of recording and statistics about things is the federal government. And the federal government wasn't doing their job when it came to UFOs. And the more I looked at it, the more I got irate as a librarian, because as a librarian, when I got my graduate degree, when they handed me my diploma, they said, as a librarian, it is your ethical duty to fight censorship at all cases. The censorship of the UFO information and the subject is there is nothing else in history that compares to the amount of concerted effort by institutions that should know better and realize it's their responsibility to not study this information. And so whether, who it is, I don't really care. The point is that they don't want you to find out who it is. They don't want you to know about it. And that's censorship, and that's wrong. And as a librarian, that is my ethics. I mean, I was a whistleblower, and I had to leave D.C. And I'm not going to talk about that, but it's another case. But it's
Dang.
yeah, look up Linda Miller Poore, Poore,
Okay.
if you want to find it. So it's, but then again, it was censorship. It was that the government libraries were trying to keep the scientists from getting the information they needed to do their jobs, and that's wrong. And that's what's happening in ufology, is that we are being prevented from getting the information that we need. And so one information that we do have that seemed to be untapped is that here MUFON and NUFARC, they're, getting all these cases, but nobody's looking at them in the aggregate, or as Cheryl calls it, it's the anthill, is just as opposed to just the ants. There's this whole quantity of data, and nobody looked at where are these things happening. Can we use the idea of epidemiology, look at geographically where things are happening and learn something from that? What we're going to learn, I don't know. That's the whole point about science, is that you ask the questions and then you do the research to see if you can find the answers, as opposed to saying, well, we already know this, and we'll look for information to support what we think.
And so, I want to just really quickly just say thank you, Collie, for making a donation to the show. Thank you. That's really nice of you. But okay, so let's talk about, organizations who have all of this information. What is the motivation? Is it just to hoard data and to make money selling memberships? Or what is behind that? Because you would think after 60, 70 years that somebody somewhere would have done something with the data, and yet they haven't, except until you did.
Well, the institutions I'm talking about are the federal government,
Right,
and states that are supported by the taxpayers, who are not getting their money's worth. The Census Department is counting, how many pizzas people eat, but they're not counting, how many UFOs or unidentified sighted objects are being sighted by people. And, not to even go into the whole abductee, experiencer thing. It's like, they're not being protected. We've got this huge budget for the Pentagon, and are these people protecting us from being abducted? It doesn't seem like it. Or if they are, they're not telling us about it. So, it's, I guess I was raised to be an intensely curious person. And when Cheryl got sort of involved in the whole UFO thing, honestly, I don't have a lot of background in the history of UFO research, et cetera. I mean, the fact that I've been able to learn how to pronounce rendezvous is something, because I had no idea.
Job. That's more than I can say.
Yeah, I bet you talked about people that you referred to, and it's like, yeah, Erica, I'm sure that they're, I don't know who you're talking about, because I'm bad with names, and I don't. There's two people have two talents when it comes to information. There's two types, basically. There are people that can remember things and go deep down into a subject, and those are the ones who take a case and study it to death. Okay. Mm-hmm. And then there's people like librarians that we have a vast knowledge, but it's very, very shallow. We know a lot about a lot of things because we just need to get the entry point into the literature. Mm-hmm. We learn how information is organized. In my case, I specialized in how scientists find information, how they think, how it's published, how it's stored, in what format, what gets written down, what doesn't, what do they just tell their colleague, but don't bother telling their peers that will be reviewing their articles, so it's like, science policy, mm-hmm. If you think ufology has big egos, you should see the National Academy of Sciences. It's truly amazing. But these guys, they're really smart, but it's like, it's as competitive as anything else.
Okay, I just have to love, like, Cheryl's laugh in the background. I'm sorry, that was really cute. And that kind of made me happy. Yeah. So thank you. Yeah.
Well, yeah, this is the reason I sort of don't go on these things, is because I get started and,
I love it.
Yeah, but I have to understand, I spent my career trying to learn to keep my mouth shut,
So now it's just like, game
I'm
on.
retired.
You're retired, game on, you're bringing it on. And that, and that is really, really cool that, you were a whistleblower. And I definitely, in fact, if you don't mind, I would love it, and I'll look you up, but I would love to hear a little bit about that, because I think that shows what kind of a person you are and how brave you are to come forward.
I can sum it up in a couple sentences, okay?
Okay.
So I was a contractor, and we were hired to run the government libraries for them, okay? In many cases, because the government employees didn't know how to run a library because they didn't have the qualifications. So they brought in contractors, professional librarians that had degrees and everything, and we would run the library for the scientists. Well, I was at EPA, and the government changed. It went from, Bill Clinton to George Bush, and the politics changed how they feel about tree huggers and, supporting these old hippies that were doing research, et cetera. And so they were looking for ways to cut money because they, taxes are bad, the government's bad. And somebody came up with a bright idea. Well, let's close the libraries and I had a scientist come to me and say, literally, don't tell my boss I came down here to check the peer-reviewed literature because I was told I should only use the information provided to me by the chemical companies. These are the people that were protecting our health. The scientists were told.
Why should I be surprised? Why should I not
Well,
be surprised? Oh, wow.
I was shocked, okay?
Wow.
And these scientists, the scientists who are not the bureaucrats, they're the people that are doing the research. They were well, they had ethics too. And they were terribly disturbed by all this. So I left the EPA. They were closing down the library. And I says, I'm not going to close down the library I spent 15 years building, okay? So I left the job and took another job at NASA, Goddard Space Center. They decided they wanted to close the library too. And there were other things going on, but basically I left. And when I left, there was some politic going on to get Congress to investigate what was going on. And I got contacted by a reporter from the Los Angeles Times. I approached the Washington Post. They didn't want to hear about it. Somebody, Los Angeles Times, broke the story. And it turned out that one of the scientists at Goddard had just won a Nobel Prize in physics. And he was not happy they were going to close the library either. And so he had much more pull than, this contractor librarian from, so they managed to not close the library down. And they didn't close the libraries down at EPA either, but I was blacklisted and was never going to have a big job again in the science librarianship. So that's... Wow. The story. So,
well, it takes a brave person to do that, and I think it's watching, a lot of people that just sit by when bad things are happening, when things that are happening that shouldn't be happening, and people just, turning a blind eye to that. That's disturbing, and I think we need to stand up and do the right thing. So
yeah, but I threw my career away.
I know. I guess that's why most people don't do the right thing, because it's like, okay, well, we've got our family to think about. We've got, the social implications, business, yada, yada, yada. I mean, it's just all these things. It does take a lot, but gosh, if we all did our little bit, the world would be a lot better place. But that's just me. But congratulations for doing the right thing.
Thank you.
Yeah, I know, that's amazing. And so, okay, so UFOs, you've got this interest. You were hanging around some pretty cool people back in the day. So tell us about some of the people that you met when you got into UFOs.
Well, I've only really been doing this since, 2015. So.
But I thought that you had met John Keel.
Oh yeah, but that wasn't
UFOs. 40. Okay, so you were doing the 40.
I was a member of the the International Fortean Society in Washington D.C. And this was before the internet. And so if you wanted to talk to people about weird things, you went to conferences, and they would have these conferences every year. And yeah, I saw really interesting people like John Keel and trying to think who else. The guy who did crop circles and a lot of famous names. I did get to see John Mack. And I was very impressed when he talked to us. And the thing that convinced me was that somebody showed some footage that was taken from a space shuttle. And it was one of these things that they had on cable TV, like at 2:00 in the morning, and they showed the tape, and it was an astronaut in the space shuttle, and he went, "What was that?" And something went by, and it went at like a 90-degree angle off the Earth, and then there was some like firing after it. And the astronaut says, "What was that?" And it looked like, somebody was firing at a UFO, and it took off. And when I saw that, it's just like, no, I'm sorry, you can't fake something like that, and certainly not the astronaut who's up there and can see. And so that, and among other things that I'd heard through the Forteans. Now the Forteans, it was interesting because they didn't really sort of like UFOs that much. That was too fringe for them, So they were more into, what are those, the knights, during the Crusades,
Templars.
Which one? What?
Templars,
Knights of Templar, that kind of thing, mysterious scrolls that, like I said, crop circles. I love crop circles. I love crop circles. And I'm going to give you my off the wall theory of crop circles, which every time I tell it to anybody in the UFO community, they just sort of back away a little bit,
But that's saying something. That is saying something right there.
So the crop circles, I think, they're really beautiful works of art. I meant that there's some of the complexity, and I've heard about all the bending and supposed to breaking and the reeds, etc. I think it's a UFO art competition. And it's like every summer, let's go to Earth and make some crop circles, and whoever's got the nicest design wins or gets bragging rights, whatever. And that's why they kept on getting more complex as they were trying to outdo each other. So that's my theory.
That's very interesting. I actually was over in England right after a crop circle appeared, and I was with Gary King, and he took me around. He had been studying crop circles for quite some time, and that was an interesting experience to go see that and to see the farm that had this crop circle that appeared, and how they were, really, bringing in people and things to the area. And then there was quite a bit of controversy about it because it appeared that it was an advertisement for a bong company.
Well, who knows?
Because I was too high. I don't know, but it was just it was interesting. It was a fascinating trip, and he was very kind, and it was just I love it. I love going on adventures like that. Whatever it turns out to be. I know Jacques Vallée had mentioned in more than probably one of his journals that he was thinking it was some sort of laser-based space weapon they were testing.
Well, they got style, is all I can say.
They do have style.
If that's their idea of being threatened, and I'm sorry, I'm not threatened by pretty things generally.
Thank you. Well, depends on. Never mind. Anyway.
Yeah, right.
What, for some reason, like David Hasselhoff just popped into my mind.
Yeah.
Even though he's not really pretty. And I don't know why. I'm sorry. I'm just, okay. Anyway, it's been a long day. And
yes.
I think that David Hasselhoff, we won't go into that. Clearly, again, a trip to the therapist is good. Good. Anyway.
I'm more the Tim Curry type if I'm going to pick someone.
You know what? Yeah, Tim Curry. Yeah, I like Tim Curry. He's just a strange, fabulous person.
Yeah.
That knows
weird is good. Yeah.
Yeah, weird. I think weird is good too.
Yeah.
But, and I've got to, going on a tangent, did you watch Don't Look Up?
Yes, I did. We were very impressed by it. It was a great piece of satire. And, how the people were acting in Washington about ignoring things. It's true. I worked with those people. It's true. They really got that. They really did. It's just like, a lot of them are really sort of space cadets. They really... all they care about is their ratings and the power. I used to tell people, what it was like being in D.C. is that, other cities, they follow the sports. It's who's the team that's doing well. It's the sport of D.C. is politics. Right. That's what people follow, and it permeates everything. The saying, if you want a friend in D.C., get a dog. It's true. It's just that people will be friendly with you as long as you have some use to them. And when, you go out of power, or you move, or they change, whatever, it's like, bye, I don't answer your emails anymore type of thing. So
isn't that interesting?
Yeah, it was
just throw you out like yesterday's trash.
Yep.
Yeah, though I really did like that movie, and it's made quite the buzz. And I will say, because I have to go back to the David Hasselhoff thing, Lord knows why. But because I have like this inside running joke with some of my clients about David Hasselhoff. I keep promising them the next time they come to the Pilates studio, they can look up and I'll have a poster of him half naked. And they clearly don't find that funny and probably think it's a bit disturbing, but it makes me laugh. So anyway, so Leonardo DiCaprio has always been one of those. Actually, I had a kind
He's
of
very classy, yes.
Yeah, little crush on him, but maybe not so much anymore. And then the Shatner thing, that's another story. But I digress too much. So anyway, thank you for letting me just share with you my strange taste in men. That's good, clearly. And so I want to go back to something that you mentioned about when you were with the EPA and how, you had people, corporations, people behind the money that were dictating or telling people what they shouldn't do, which, we know that that's a pretty common theme. I look at a place like the Uinta Basin when there's so much of that going on, and looking at a really wonderful Rolling Stone article that was written a few years ago about all the stillbirths in the area and how people were raising alarm to that fact, but then the person, the woman that was delivering all the children, who thought that this was something really important and worthy of study, how she was shut down by people in the community. Do you think that there is, when you look at UFOs, and I know that Tom Conwell has kind of thought this and put this out there, as well, that you've got areas where there is this sort of, high pollution, where there's something wrong in the environment, and then you've got UFO sightings that are in the same locations. Can you expand on that a little bit, because I find that fascinating?
Well, he's done good work with the correlations, of course, there's a truism, correlation is not causation. So you can't, just because things exist in the same place doesn't necessarily mean one caused the other. I do know that when it comes to things that cause people to get sick or birth defects or whatever, that there's a lot of cover up, that the EPA is his when I was there, even when the good years, the scientists' hands would be tied about what they were allowed to talk to and to the press, things that are just coming out now, we knew about years ago, and, endocrine disruptors, that's not a secret to anybody that's been in environmental health, but yeah, to me, it makes sense, because the things that experiencers and abductees, et cetera, say, to a certain extent, they want us to save the planet. They're concerned about what we're doing. And so it would make sense they would go over the toxins, because there's lots of toxins. What the average person in the United States, what they call their body burden, the amount of chemicals they're carrying around, it's really high. And, one of my favorite things is like, well, if you're fat and you lose weight, those chemicals go in your bloodstream. And so if your diet makes you feel bad, it could be because some of the toxins that you've been storing in your body fat are being released in the bloodstream and making you sick. So, there's all kinds of fun facts like that they don't want you to think about. That's like the things that are in the water. They know how to clean the water to get all this stuff out, but nobody wants to pay for it. You see, it always comes down to money. Right. Nobody wants to pay for it. They know how to get the water clean, and it's always, well, yeah, we want to put it to this level. Like lead, when Bush came in, it was like, well, we don't want the level of lead in the bloodstream. We need to lower that level that's allowed, And it's like, I personally did the search for that, and I'm really upset that they said, oh, well, good research wasn't done, and that's not true. It was, and but it's always political as to industry. They don't want to give us our gasoline or our coal because there's money to be made. And it's the same thing with toxic chemicals. And I mean, personally, I hope ET, if it is ET, whoever dimension, I mean, I don't know where they're coming from, but I hope somebody's looking out for us, because obviously as humans, we're not too smart about how we're soiling our nest and making it difficult. I mean, I wasn't able to have children, and I grew up in Cleveland. The river caught on fire when I was a kid. I mean, the water was really bad, and so who knows whether it's those chemicals that I was drinking during my whole childhood that caused the problem.
Right. Well, it's interesting because I lived at Dugway Proving Ground.
Yeah, lovely.
And so this explains so much, really. I mean, why I have 3 heads and speak in tongues, I don't know, but, and also have a lot of degenerative problems and different things. And so cataracts at 32, very interesting, but it's like we just, here in Utah, and this is a beautiful state, I've lived here my whole life, had a very politically active community active family, and it is quite it's sad to me the more I learned the fact that people are just so willing to turn a blind eye, I guess because it's convenient and we can go to work and take the kids to soccer and go to church on Sundays, but yet we're letting more and more things take place in our state that it will affect the health and livelihood of people in Utah. And when you look at Dugway Proving Ground and you look at other places in the area in the state, the life expectancy is lower than it is if you were in a different area. And so it's sad, and I know money is the end all be all, and so it takes a lot to stand up to that. But as far as the UFO, the correlation there, what do you make of that? And I've got to ask you this, could that be maybe an excuse for people to use the UFO narrative to hide other things that are going on in the environment?
Well, I meant maybe when you look at the data, the distribution of sightings that seem to be correlating with these areas, maybe they're trying to bring attention and say, okay, we're going to buzz these areas. And, if you pay attention to us, maybe you'll start to think, well, why are they coming here? I know, like Utah's not a good state. It's had a lot of mining there. It's pretty damn polluted. And, so it's whether all I can assume is that they're trying to bring attention to places and problems. And there is between the government and in some cases in ufology itself that they're trying to deflect attention from this, there's nothing to see here, move on. And I think that's one of the reasons that like our data work is, I mean, we've had shows that, what are you going to talk about? And Cheryl's like, well, we do data research. Oh, that's boring. That's statistics. We don't want to hear about it, And yet, these people, it's social media. Oh, they've got 2 million followers. Well, that's a number too, you care about that number, but you don't care about this number over here. And so it's all very selective. Mm-hmm. So I think, that the statistics, I don't know. It's frustrating, I guess I would say, that it, I mean, I don't do the data work itself. She does the data work. I'm not a real numbers person, although I do the household bookkeeping. So there's some question there about, about the numbers. But I use software to do it. So, so yeah, I think that Tom is on to something, but anybody paying attention to him either,
He's such a lovely man. I just think the world of him. He's been such a great person over the years to me, and I know that he's worked really hard on everything that he's done, and so that is interesting. And I wanted to share a story that I've talked a little bit about on my show before, because to me it was just like so disturbing, I guess. But in a certain documentary about a certain ranch in Utah, there was a person, the documentary loose words there, filmmaker, who actually interviewed a woman and her son had some very serious health issues. And this investigative journalist is kind of leading the mother on to say, well, yes, his health issues are because he saw a UFO. And to me, I was like, what? And seriously, how do you look at yourself in the mirror in the morning? I mean, that's really reprehensible in my, for me, for somebody to say, wait a minute, you've got health concerns. You might not want to look at what's going on in your environment and what we're doing to pollute this area, but let's blame it on UFOs. And so I think that in some cases, the UFO narrative is being used as a cover story by people that are making a great deal of money in the area doing things that harm the environment. That's my thought.
Well, since I'll utilize my psychology degree here, that the only way I could see that impacting, I think it can impact people's mental health. Okay, so because seeing a UFO, it can be very disturbing for people because in some cases, it shatters their reality. It's like if somebody does psychedelics for their first time, all of a sudden there's a different world than they've seen before. And so seeing a UFO could upset you, and that could stress you out. And maybe the stress could impact physical health, but as if they're implying that seeing the UFO, that incident caused the illnesses, there's no scientific basis for that. But then again, in this world that we live in, people make up their own facts. So,
No,
I know, shocking, isn't
what?
it?
Okay, wait a minute. This is like the biggest breakthrough I've ever had. This is the biggest expose ever on my show.
Yeah. So, so that's the only way I could see any kind of causation, is that it caused them to be psychologically disturbed, and that can cause physical illnesses to a certain extent. But I have to say, what kind of illness was it too? If it's something that's clearly caused by a toxin or something, I mean, if he was looking at the UFO and he's standing on a toxic waste site, yeah, maybe it did, but that's not, again, correlation is not causation,
Right. Yeah, I mean, from my recollection, it was MS. But I will have to, try to endure that again.
Yeah,
to figure that out. But yeah, I mean, that was just it to me. It was just that was not what you do, necessarily. I don't know. Anyway, so thank you for going over that with me. I appreciate it. I feel much better now. So,
well, the thing that popped in my mind is that it's no better back when, in medieval times, when somebody would get sick and is, the witch did it to me. She looked at me wrong, and and then
I still get that.
Yeah, exactly. So having somebody who's working on a witchcraft book, that it's not. Ufology is not far removed from magic, and that they say that a lot of people look at it that way, that it's a that we're all crazy and fantasizing. I mean, I had that at work when I was at the college, that I was respected and treated well until they found out that I was involved in this UFO research, and then people literally shunned me at Christmas parties and stuff. It was very.
Move to Utah.
Oh yeah, right. No, I don't think so.
Please, I need a sister.
Yeah, it's too hot.
No, but I mean, it's like here it's you've got people and that are very influential in the world of UFOs that are working on the governor's economic advisory board and things. So it's you should definitely. If you want to talk about UFOs,
that's more politics. I've had it up to here with politics in my life.
I know. So. Okay, well, it was worth a try. I had a little moment there where I was just picturing the three of us driving around in my Galaxy convertible, and
we don't do field research.
Well, that's okay. We could just go for a drive and get a hamburger. I don't care.
Yeah. Well.
That would be fun. But thank you, though. Anyway, it's really fun. So when you started doing the research for everything, all of your work and analyzing the data, there were specific organizations that you looked to for that data, specifically NUFORC and MUFON.
Right.
And how can you just tell us a little bit about the process, how you initially approached each organization and what the process was, how easy was that for you to get the information and how that played out?
Well, in some cases, both cases actually, we did have to contact the organization and ask for permission to use their data. NUFORC was easier to actually get it off their site. MUFON, it was not easy to access it. We had to get special tapes from MUFON. We also had to sort of, assure them that we were not interested in any of the personal information, that we just wanted the who, what, where, and how. Actually, we don't even need the who. We didn't care, who the person was, if they were male or female. We're not doing that kind of analysis. We just wanted to know when it was seen and what time, what day of the week, etc. Where. And the where was fun because people don't know where they are. They don't know how to spell the names of the cities they live in. They don't know, it's the data was really, really messy. And Cheryl, each time when we did the first book in 2015, and then, people were, when are you going to do another one? I says, let's wait at least into a reasonable time period. So we waited until 2020 was over. And so we could have the 20 years. I was the one that really wanted to do 21st century information. That was my way of fighting this, oh, well, but what about happened in 1980 or 1947? It's like, who cares? If you're trying to research something that's going on now, but there's a lot of fear among people in the ufology community. They don't want to admit that this is going on now. And when you put data in front of them and say there's, over 100,000 sightings, in the last 20 years, and Cheryl's got some great stories of people that practically fainted when they found out what the numbers were like, because people, ask them and say, well, how many UFOs do you think people, see, like in Cleveland? Probably 1 or 2 a year. And it's like, no, it's much more than that. And remember, we were just counting people that saw things and went to the bother of reporting it. Most people, Cheryl's seen sightings that she hasn't bothered to report. I have too. Not everybody goes through the effort of reporting it. And so we're just seeing a small part of the number of sightings that are out there. Of course, they could all be the same UFO going around a lot very fastly and everybody's seeing the same one, but probably not, because to me, it's the... I was telling Cheryl that, I think the secret is in the shapes, that, there's at least 29 to 33 different shapes that people have identified of what they're looking at. And my argument has been is that, like here on this planet, if you see sort of like a box and somebody sitting behind a wheel and driving it, it's got 4 wheels, etc. No matter what color it is or whether it has, fins on or whatever, you can sort of figure out it's a car or a truck, it's a surface vehicle. Where you look at these shapes that are being cited, and they're all over the place. It's not just all saucers. There's egg-shaped. There's cubes. Hopefully not the Borg, but ovals, bell bar shaped ones. They're all different kinds of shapes, and it's like, why are there so many different shapes unless there's a bunch of different players involved? What would be the purpose except that Vulcan or whatever is sending a different type of ship that's different from what's popular among the Klingons. I'm a Star Trek fan, so that's why.
Me too. Mostly I just love William Shatner's girdle, and I wish I had one like that. But
I was always a Mr. Spock fan. I'm sorry.
Oh,
I like the
I can see that.
Exotic.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
How about Cheryl?
I don't know. She was a Shatner fan. No, she didn't like Shatner either.
I'm a Nimoy fan.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh.
I have a friend that I grew up with that was a big Star Trek fan, one of my buddies, and she had a thing for Sulu, And she turned out to become a nun. And because she was a nun, she got George Takei to start interacting with her by mail and stuff. And
No
she,
way.
yeah, she met him. And, it's just because I guess because she had that special
That is
sort
so
of
cool.
status of being a nun. So, yeah, so it's
interesting.
Yeah. So anyway, I think the different shapes. And another crazy theory I have is that one of the things that we found is that the volume of UFOs over time, it seems to have like a 7-year cycle where it goes up and then goes down again. And, we're looking at that. So what could it be? And I said, I think they all went back to get the new model spaceship, that after 7 years it was time to trade it in and get, do their upgrades, et cetera. And so everybody left to go back and get their maintenance or whatever back to the shipyard, and then they come back. So of course I say that to ufologists and they look at me like, yeah, she's wacko, So
as if.
Well, see, that's one of my arguments is that, I'm very much a big feminist. I have been since 73. I marched in 73 in D.C. For Equal Rights Amendment. And I really, over the years, as I've learned to talk to people and learn things that, because of our hormones and our brains are slightly different between male and female, that we look at things differently. And I think that was one of the things that ufology suffers from, is that it's been dominated by men, and men are socialized differently. They're educated differently.
White men.
And, well, yeah, white men too, but men in general.
Right.
Those who have the important, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think that as more women get involved, like you and us, et cetera, that we have, we look at things from a different standpoint. And I think that's like why we're so disconcerting to the ufology community and the men, is that when we said, well, let's look at the geographic distribution of where this is happening. And it's like, we want to go out in the woods and look for shards of spaceships and stuff. We got to go do manly things.
Or we got to go to the freezer and grab another hungry man and sit behind the computer and type away like a little man in a sandbox.
Well, my example of this is that we went to a UFO conference and they had some Bigfoot hunters. Okay. And it's like, okay, I'll sit here and listen to it. And this guy comes up and he does his Bigfoot presentation, and literally it was like, oh, and this guy, he let us stay in his garage while we were looking for Bigfoot. It was really nice. And here's a picture of us all camping out in the garage, and most of the research was like that. Okay. And somebody, we went up to him afterwards because he said that, well, they had found, some
DNA.
What was it?
DNA.
They found some DNA, that was suspicious. And we asked him, well, did you go get it analyzed? And he said, yeah, it was definitely not human DNA. And said, why didn't you mention that in your presentation instead of who you were camping with, And he didn't think that was important.
Maybe he gave it to Tom DeLonge.
Yeah.
Sold it to him for $30,000 or something.
Exactly. Then they could afford an RV instead of having to stay in garages. Yeah. It just, and it's the scientists that blew my mind. It's like, don't you understand what's important? That you're more concerned about all the cool adventures you've had, instead of, you had DNA analyzed and you didn't bother to mention this, they had put us on a panel, and so like, I usually don't do these things. I let Cheryl do it. So they put me on the panel. They put me next to Mark Antonio. And it was like kindred spirits. It's like, boy, were we, it was fun. I haven't had that much fun with the ufologist in a long time. And he was like, go ahead, bring up something else controversial, because it was like most of them were just sort of stick in the muds that it wasn't enough curiosity and questioning. And like I brought up, where's the peer-reviewed literature? Why is it, why?
God, you are a heretic among heretics.
It's like, where's the reference lists at the end of your books? Where's, they put a caption up, and there's like 5 people standing there, okay? They give you the names of 3 of them, and they don't tell you which 3 they are. And it's like, not everybody knows who everybody is. I says, I work in libraries where we had 150-year-old books sitting in our regular circulating shelves. Paper and books last a long time if they're taken care of properly. Somebody in 100 years is going to take it off the shelf and look at this picture, and they're not going to know who this person is if you don't tell them, and nobody else then can replicate your work. And I had this argument with an author that we thought about publishing, and it's just like, there's too much, oh, well, this person said that, and it's well known that blah 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 blah, and they don't have footnotes or reference lists or endnotes or anything. Say, where did they get the information from? If somebody 50 years later picks up your book, if it was really a scientific book, they should be able to build on your research. And the way you do that is having your information and sources identified clearly enough that he can give it to some poor librarian and she can find it for him.
You're just blowing my mind tonight. I mean,
so I'm thinking about writing a book about this.
Oh my God, please.
It's like, it'll have to be my last thing because I'll never, I'll be struck out of the profession, So.
I mean, but it's just so refreshing to have 1 out of, 5,000 people that actually is logical.
Yeah.
But like I said, yeah. Anyway, that's amazing. I've got a question here from my friend Peter. He wants to know, did you send your book to Seth Shostak or any other arch skeptics, and what did they say?
No, we did not, because we were doing original research, and when you're okay, like I said, I'm a librarian, okay, and we wanted to put out a reference book. That's why it's called U.S. Deaths Reference. I know that's a really boring title, but I looked at the reference books that will be sitting in a library shelf that somebody who wants to look up a statistic that they want, that it now exists, that didn't exist before. So we were providing original material, original research. We didn't have to get anybody's approval, because it's like, well, how many statistical studies have you done? Nobody else has done it. So how dare you tell me that this isn't any good? I'm confident in the work that we've done, Now it may, it's probably not accurate, because you know what? We have no accurate statistics because nobody, when you want, as a librarian, as you're looking at a piece of information, the ways you decide whether it's probably a good piece of information is who published it. Is it out of a respected institution? And who are respected institution? Scientific organization, government agencies, universities. Mm-hmm. How many of them are publishing UFO stuff? They are, because they're being censored. They're not allowed to do the research. I mean, you want to get Cheryl going, ask her about her outreach trying to get to talk at academic institutions. That's why I said the basic problem here is the censorship. And, people are concerned about stupid censorship, issues like, well, I can't put that on my Facebook page. They don't like the picture. And it's like, this is not important. We need to look at what important is. And the fact that we might finally be able to prove that we had contact with intelligences from another planet, or another universe or another dimension, whatever. This is important.
Does it worry you that if E.T. was here, that people like Jeremy Corbell would be our spokesperson?
Who is Jeremy Corbell?
Okay.
I'm sorry. Like I said, I'm not involved in the politics.
Sorry. I just needed to say that because sometimes it makes me feel good. All right.
Okay.
I know.
I probably would be worried if you're worried, I'm worried.
Yes. Be worried. Be very worried.
Be worried. Yeah.
Hence my puppet show that is coming up. I keep threatening, like as a means of like therapy, that I will do a UFO puppet show. Just of some of the characters, and it again, it's one of those things. I just have a good laugh. But anyway, so let's bring on the person sitting next to you, who I can hear clapping and cheering, and
she's handling me little notes that I'm supposed to talk about. It's like,
cute.
No, you can do that in your hour.
Well, you know what? There's a reason you two are together. That's good. That's good. And so please introduce your lovely spouse.
Okay, this is Cheryl Costa, who has had an amazing career as a information scientist, as in the military. I mean, she lived in submarines for years, and it's like, it just boggles my mind. I mean, I went into a submarine for like 20 minutes on a tour, and I just, how can you stand this? There's all this water up there, So very brave person, was in Vietnam. I mean, you know what she did in Vietnam? She put up telephone wires.
Wow.
And like she says, people shoot at you when you're up a telephone pole,
Holy
So
cow.
she's had medals and stuff. So very brave person. She's been a playwright that she's been performed and published. Been on radio in various forms over the years. Has written books. Is a novelist. She make up really big fibs that make really great novels. It's just she can spin a story. She really can. And so that's why I usually let her talk. So.
No, this is so much fun. I mean, honestly, like it's fun to hear you talk, and you've had an amazing experiences in your life, and I commend you for being a whistleblower and doing the right thing and taking on this project that is, one of a kind, and 70 years later.
Yeah.
So
okay,
and then at the end of the show, I want you guys to come back together, so we can talk to both of you. Okay,
We can do that.
Okay, I would love that.
All right, here she is.
Okay.
Unplug anything.
She had the wire. She was going to pull the laptop off onto the floor, so.
You know what? This makes a good show. A good show.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, here, let me do this. Bada bing. There you go. Okay. There you go.
She also does electronics.
Oh. Well, if the headphone thing was any before the show started, yes, that's good. I need somebody like that, clearly, that can say, push that unmute button, Erica. Hello. But, I will say that it is really, really, really fun to actually see you. Because the last time we did a show, we did it, it was radio or podcast, whatever.
It was just audio, yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's like I love seeing your face and seeing the expressions and seeing your hand go up in the background.
Have you noticed that, I don't know if you see some of my feed, we're friended on Facebook. Have you noticed right now, like my face is plastered all over London?
That is so cool.
Yeah, it is.
Tell us about that. Tell us.
Oh, okay. I'm going to be launching a program on the 3rd of February called Mystical Mentors. And real short story, it came from the idea, I did a UFO interview with this UK outfit, and it was a 2-hour show. In the last half hour, the guy said, look, I've seen a couple other shows, and you talk the woo-woo side of the, the consciousness aspect of UFOs. And he said, a lot more about this mystical stuff than you talked about. Would you be interested in doing a program about just mystical stuff? So it's going to be called Mystical Mentors. I've got guests booked all the way out to June. And I'm not just talking Joe over here who thinks he's a mage. I've got my first 2 guests on the first show are 2 PhDs, and they are both women. They're coming on to talk about the divine feminine topic. They both got separate books on the topic.
How fun.
And we already had them get together on the phone, and they've already chatted up. And they know exactly how they're going to deal with it, doing it together. So we're going to talk all that stuff. And I'm part of the show. I'm going to be teaching tidbits to the audience who's interested about aspects of mystical magic. This is how you prepare yourself to do magical physics. So that
is so cool.
It's going to be kind of a cool show. And I got a book coming out here shortly called you're going to love this. It's called, here it is. Mystical, let's see, it's called Magical Musings of a Rogue Witch.
Oh, Rogue Witch.
It's in.
I want to be a rogue witch.
It's in final. It just means nobody's going to invite you to anything. Believe me, nobody invited me to anything.
There you have it.
But the book, I wish you could see the, and maybe after the show, I'll send you what the blurbs are. I sent it out for peer review within the senior witch community. And I was expecting everybody to hate it. And I got back glowing stuff. They said, my God, everybody should be reading this, that kind of thing. Because I could take a completely different approach to magic and divining. I'm not about dressing up in the robes. Oh, a long time ago I did, but I'm not about the robes. I'm not about the wands, not about the candles, the incense, crystals. Good God, don't buy crystals. And it's about, you want to learn how to touch the universe. You want to learn how to be connected to the ultimate force in the universe and be able to either touch it for knowledge or utilize it for active magic. You have to learn to meditate. And more people think that is more difficult than sitting there with thumb screws on.
Yeah. Well, especially in our society today.
Our Western culture, yeah.
You know what I mean? It's just like, and now we've got, TikTok, and it's like, we're so overstimulated by things that we've lost that ability to connect.
Our whole Western society is set up to distract you.
Right. Shocking.
And that whole thing. So that's coming out in a couple of weeks. In fact, we're in final layup right now on it. And I was working on the cover this afternoon. So it should be interesting. So the next 2 months are going to be interesting. COVID really messed up the circuit for those of us who do talks at conferences. I mean, the conference circuit went to hell. It really did. The fact that I've got 6 speaking engagements this year is a marvel.
Wow.
I was speaking someplace every other week all through 2019. And then COVID came along and shot everything in the head. But let's go there for a minute. Beginning of 2020, we were just finished. We were just getting ready to start the new UFO book, the pink book. And make sure you ask me why it's pink. There's a cool story to go through that. All right. So I get this call from, and probably your audience knows, probably from about 2014 down to about 2017, 18, the UFO numbers went down and they tanked. It was going down about 30% a year for those 5 years. Okay. And everybody, the stories I was hearing, people were dropping me mail. Remember, I was still a journalist, and people are saying, "Oh my God, they go home, Space Force chased them away." Oh, there's this, that. Oh my God, they ran out of grants and
no,
they went
Corey
home.
Good chased them away.
Oh yeah. There you go, that too. And all this stuff is going on. And I kept telling everybody, guys, it's a 7 to 8 year cycle. They'll be back, about 19 or 20, and then, oh, you don't know anything, you just do the numbers, I said, trust me, they'll be back in 19 or 18, or 19 or 20. And so I took 19 off. I stopped working on anything to do because I knew I was going to be doing a book in 20. And all I really had to do was wait around for the databases to accumulate all the sightings, right? So I was working on other stuff at the time. I was getting some of my plays published and things like that. So I get a call from George Knapp around the end of February of 2020, just before we went into the lockdown. And he said, "Hey, is your phone ringing off the hook?" Mine is, because people are saying they're back in spades. And I said, "Let me check. I'll call you back in an hour," So I went out and pulled National UFO Reporting Center January and February numbers. Well, I already had a model set up in my computer, so I just dropped the end of month numbers into the thing. And I called him back a half hour later and I said, "Hey, George, if this holds up, this is going to be the best year since 2014 or 13. He said, "Really?" I said, "Yeah, they're coming back in spades here from what I can see. And it's the middle of the winter, and winter numbers are much lower than they are in the warmer months." So he said, "Okay, keep me posted." The other thing, he had me on Coast to Coast shortly after that. And we were talking, and we talked about the fact that one of the things we discovered was that people's leisure time had an impact on the volume of sightings.
Right. Well, add smoking and dog walking.
Yeah, right. Okay, you remember that. Smoking, dog walking, and bedtime, 8:30 to 10:30, 11:30 at night. So I had a lot of fans after that show email me and say, hey, Cheryl, we're getting ready to go into a lockdown. This will be the perfect national laboratory to test this. So by the end of April, going into May, we had the new numbers come out. I had March and April numbers, and they were through the roof. So it kind of confirmed that idea of leisure time availability, nobody doing anything else. It was quite amazing. Now, the rest of the year was kind of goofy. You could almost track the ups and downs across the year with people getting back to work, then the next surge, people getting back to work, then the next surge.
Right.
You can almost track it with that.
And so what about the news cycle? Like how have stories that have been, put forward in the media, I mean, how does that affect the number of sightings reports?
Well, there is a little bit of an impact to that, and they've discovered that back with Blue Book. But remember back in the Blue Book days, if somebody reported a sighting today, and there'd be that little rash of sighting reports over the next week or so, that was because the stuff was reported in the paper. Okay, but stuff since '68 in the Condon report, for the most part, the news organizations just don't report the stuff.
Right.
Okay. In the past year or so, Jeffrey Corbell and all those guys, things have been going a little bit more attention. But then remember we had, we were seeing stuff on CNN. Oh my God, there's triangles up there on this infrared screen. There's all this stuff. And then suddenly the news cycle went boom. It was like somebody threw a switch. And suddenly we didn't hear anything. And that was suspicious. And as somebody in the media, I say, well, somebody picked up the phone and called the top guy in the 6 corporations that own all the media in this country and say, cut it off. And that's what I think happened. Now, remember they were talking about, guys like Rubio had just got that bill passed with the one COVID thing. Guys like Bassett knew about it back in early 2019. He knew about the bill. He knew that Rubio was going to attach it to something that would pass. And we kind of knew that there was this possibility in 19 or 20, not knowing about COVID, that we might have congressional hearings, especially if Rubio got his bill passed. Okay. So what happened was we were sort of told, well, you girls have done the only statistical analysis since Blue Book. Are you prepared to testify before Congress? And Linda and I sat there and saying, oh, yeah, lesbian couple. One of us is a tranny. Oh, gee, all right. But all right. So the two of us got thinking. We were just starting to work on the 2020 compilation of 20 years, right? It said, okay, if we're going to be testifying before Congress, I want everybody to know that senator or congressman is thumbing through our book. So let's make it fuchsia pink so you can flag it, brighten up the flag in aircraft,
Brilliant.
And that was the deal. All right. So through the whole Jeffrey Corbell thing, and the bill passed, all this stuff, and there was a lot of talk. Are we going to have some kind of a government agency get back in the business of doing this stuff, right? I quietly sat down one week and I took 2 copies of that book and I generated one for the Senate Intel Committee and I sent it to Rubio. In fact, I gave him a printout of Florida. Florida is number 2 in the country for sightings, 17,000 in that 20-year period. Wow. And my database is much more advanced than it used to be. We were able to report his sightings in Florida right down to the zip code level, which, congressmen and senators like to know about. Okay. So it was 1.5 inches thick. So between the book and that and a very short about a half a page cover letter. Okay. We sent him and the head of the House Intel Committee, almost equal packages. And that guy was in New York, like my home state at the time. So we cranked him a similar thing for New York, right down to the zip code level and said, by the way, if you guys decide to have congressional hearings, we are the civilian experts on the statistics. We'll be happy to come and testify.
Wow.
And funny thing, when the White Book came out in 2017, the UFO 2001 to 2015, when that first book came out, we sent a copy to Senator Schumer's office and Senator Gillibrand. Okay, and look who Gillibrand is on the Senate Intel Committee now. this year. Okay. And her office never responded to our white book. But suddenly now she's put the bill forward to have a government agency do these things. So perhaps we had some influence.
That is great. You got to be proud about, got to feel good about that.
We're happy about that. We really are. We really are. Somebody asked me how I got into this. You know, you heard Linda tell you about how we were doing it. I was a journalist and everything, but I've had several radio programs say, wait a minute, your average person does not compile stuff like this.
Right.
And there were a couple of ex-military types on this particular program. It was on KGRA. And they said, Cheryl, you're using old school intelligence techniques along with modern tools. And I said, okay, you got me.
And so I want to ask you a little bit about that, because I think I just find it fascinating, your military career, you know, your background. I mean, give us a little more information about that.
I volunteered for the Air Force, signed up hoping to get into advanced electronics in the Air Force. I'd taken electronics in high school. I was number 2 in my class for that. And best they could do is say, we're going to make you a telephone lineman. That's the best they could do. And so they didn't even send me to telephone line school. They sent me to what they call a direct duty assignment, where the guys at the particular base I was assigned to taught me kind of like, you know, apprenticeship kind of style. You know, you watch us, then we'll have you do it, you know, that kind of thing. And then I went to Vietnam, and we did stuff up with cherry pickers, and we did climb some poles, and people shoot at you on those things, you know. But I was very fortunate in that regard, and that's what I did in the Air Force. Okay, and I did same kind of telephone stuff, except we did it in the form of construction up in Korea in 1972. Now people say, well, why are they constructing military telephone systems in Korea in 1972? If you're old enough to remember the Pueblo incident that from 1969, when one of our ships got captured by the North Koreans and the guys got put in prison camp for about a year and a half or something like that. They realized after that ship got captured that nobody had upgraded the telephone system in military telephone system in Korea since the Korean War. So the Air Force got the task, what they call a telephone scheme, a design. And basically, when I transferred out of Vietnam, I volunteered for a second overseas tour, and I went to Korea, and I got to be part of a mobile telephone crew, and we were just, you know, building telephone systems. You know, it was a lot of fun. And if it hadn't been for the Agnes hurricane in June of 1972 in my hometown being under 40 feet of water, I probably would have stayed over there. I enjoyed what I was doing, and I enjoyed the Orient. Now, I was out for 2 years, wanted to go back in. The Air Force was not taking people. It was at the end of the Vietnam War. At this point, it was about 74, 75. They were reducing forces, and you couldn't get back in if you'd previously been in. They were only taking new kids off the street. And I was walking out of the recruiter's office. This Navy recruiter looked at me and said, kid, come here, man. I got something for you, you know. And he offered me a 2-year package of school in the Navy for advanced electronics and that type of thing. So that's what I did. And I can't tell you what I did, but I was qualified in radar, I was qualified in periscope photography, and I was qualified in signals analysis. But I can't tell you beyond that what I did.
So let's talk about that a little bit. So you can't talk about what you did. Why is that? Even though you're no longer, you know, involved.
And everything I worked with technically is unclassified as of 2004. Mm-hmm. Well, it wasn't like World War II, where we won the war and that was the deal. And all those great submariners from the Second World War got to write their great stories about what happened in the Great World War II. We came out of the Cold War, and it was sort of a loss by default. And the Russians are still there, and a lot of us looked at this and said they're going to be a pain in the ass in the future, and they are. You know, and to talk about what I did would talk about how we managed to do the Cold War the way we did, and we just didn't want to share information with them. And a lot of us just said, we're just not going to write anything, as much as I would have loved to as a writer. I really, really wanted to write about it, but I couldn't.
And so, and that brings me to, a question. I mean, you see so many, well, there are people in the UFO subject over the decades that have, oh, I've got, I've had this top secret clearance and yada, 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 yet they're, spilling the beans and giving out information that clearly, is questionable.
Okay.
I mean, what do you think about that? I mean,
I had that kind of special compartmented clearance myself. I couldn't fly on a non-flag U.S. aircraft. Like if I wanted to go to Europe on vacation, I had to fly U.S. carriers only for 5 years. Okay. And a lot of my friends, we all did similar work. They had to do the same thing. So, when these people say, oh, I had this high clearance when we dealt with UFOs, I have a hard time buying it personally. Because I'd be worried they want to put me in the ground, and I worry about them putting my wife in the ground.
so I mean, what do you, and there are people, I mean, we know that the whole subject is filled with people that have come forward with these deathbed confessions or.
Now, that's different. They're going in the ground anyway, so,
Yeah, but I mean, I think that there are, with one certain deathbed confession we won't get into, but even though it would be fun, but, it's like you've got people that are talking about these, it's like I've got this, I worked for the DOD and, I've got, blah, 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 saying that they have all these credentials and yet.
Okay. Yeah.
And at the end of the day, it's like you do a simple background search and
Yep.
they're completely full of it, but yet nobody in the UFO subject asks questions. Or
I've been reading UFO literature since I was in high school. I saw my first UFO with my mother when I was 12. And you know how mom and dad are stupid when you're a teenager. Well, I can't talk to my family. I'm disowned and disinherited, but I could probably still pick up the phone and tell my mother a good UFO story, because that was one of the few things we still could talk about. Okay. And the deal is I was very well read on the topic, right up till I got out of the I got in the Air Force. And when I got in the Air Force, they got in this one big clearance meeting, and they said, okay, you're all being evaluated for clearances. If you're going to be cleared, you can't be a member of this list of 75 organizations. And MUFON was on it, that kind of thing, and back in the day, I remember when my mother got a mimeograph letter in the mail from Illinois for this Mutual UFO Network, or whatever it was called at that time, that just spun off from APRO, because she was getting mailings from different groups, in those days, everything was just paper mail and mimeograph letters and things. And so I kept my mouth shut. Now, what was my next UFO incursion? Christmas Eve, 1971, Cam Bay, Vietnam. I'm going down to midnight mass with a buddy of mine. Neither one of us were still Catholics anymore, but we figured, hey, let's go down for tradition, all that stuff, and midnight mass. We were walking down and we saw this thing streaking across the sky. I said, oh, jet. And it stops. He said, jets don't stop like that. And I said, yeah, helicopters don't fly that fast. And I said, if that's what I think it is, it might start dancing around like a fairy. Gone. Neither one of us had our minds at midnight mass, obviously, when we got there. But we kept our mouths shut because people would think you're a Looney Tune in 1971, 72 time frame. Hell, they still think we're Looney Tunes. Okay.
So, but what do you think, though, because sometimes, when I've gone to different conferences or when I've listened to certain podcasts or things, people are putting out things that are Looney Tunes. There is a definite group in the UFO community that is not hinged in reality. And
yeah.
Oh
no, I'm there with you. I am there with
Yeah,
you. When I wrote my newspaper column, 7 years, 238 articles. My editor said, I will never censor you. I agreed to go down the middle. not too much woo, not too, and basically tell a good story. And we had an understanding. I wrote my UFO stories very much like a story, like the car accident on the corner, the fire over in the next neighborhood. I did it very respectfully and very matter of fact, like it was anything else going on in town. Okay. And that garnered a great deal of respect for the column. So 2 or 3 years later, I wrote this real snarky article about disclosure, talking about, hey, when we really do have disclosure, maybe Good Morning America will have somebody like Whitley Strieber or Walton on, and they'll get the alien guys to come down. They'll have this like reconciliation program, they'll shake hands and everything, and all this. There will be perfume named after alien spices and things, all this kind of stuff, including late night ambulance chaser commercials. Due to galactic treaties, if you lost your job reporting a UFO or seeing a UFO, or have had cattle abducted or something happened to your family, the law firm of Petrova and is happy to represent you.
Petrova.
Petrova, Barons, and DeMarco. Pardon me?
Popoff. Just kidding.
No. Petrova was a character I played in live action.
Okay, I was just kidding. Sorry.
Okay, well, that's where it came from. Mensenka Petrova, Colonel in Soviet Air Force.
I like that.
Oh, you should see her picture. So okay, that was the deal, and that they didn't censor me. They spiked the story. That's when the editor drops your story on a big spike on a desk. It's not going anywhere. And I said, why? And they came back to me and they said, we feel that in the last 3 years, you've established such gravitas with the strength of your column and the readership that you're pulling. Remember, mine was online, so they were able to measure that stuff. They said, we think this would hurt you and hurt the column. No, we're not going to publish it.
Wow.
So when we published the book of all my columns together, when the paper went out of business, I was always a freelance, so I owned my articles, and the publisher let me pull the stuff off the server and everything. And we put them all into a nice big 8.5 by 11 book available on Amazon. It's called The UFO Beat. Okay, if you go to look up the books, put Cheryl Costa in there and look up UFO Beat, you'll see this book with a sky and all that kind of thing. And that's 7 years worth of newspaper articles by one author,
Cool.
That did this. So that was the flavor of it. And so we had a really big audience, and would you believe I had the hot column? I have not been able to land a gig like that since. Oh, we can't have that. It would degrade our journalistic integrity, they tell me.
That's so bizarre.
You would think.
Wow.
I looked at one editor and he said, look, I've been written up in the New York Times. Do you know how many phone calls my editors got from news directors and editors all over the planet, let alone my home phone? When that April 24th article, 2017, if your listeners want to see that article, Google NYT for New York Times, NYT Costa UFO. You'll get that article. Okay. And it was talking about the White Book, the first time anybody done statistics. Now, the climate changed in 5 years when we tried to get them to do a book about the Pink Book, which is even better. They weren't interested. They were too busy talking to Jeremy Corbell, I'm sorry. Guys like him. Nobody wanted to talk to the lady with statistics. They want to talk about those things that are chasing our jets. It's weird.
No, it's disturbing.
In New York
multiple
State,
fronts.
when the Pink Book came out in New York State, I reached State University of New York. Okay. Now, I got to say a couple of good things for them. State University of New York at Empire State College, they gave me my bachelor's degree in 2015 in entertainment writing. Okay. 40-year-old college work that they all brought in there and made it into something. And the State University of New York at Albany has taken my paper. So all my UFO research is now immortal.
That's great.
Along with all my plays and all my weird writing and everything. So,
But that's important, though.
oh, it is important. It is important. Yeah, it is.
I mean, and that may, it's interesting because I know that there was in Roswell, they had a body of work from a person, and I wish I could remember. Barry Greenwood is going to hurt me for not. Oh, I think it was. Oh my gosh. Okay, I'm having a little brain cramp. But they were given this person's all of his files, and they decided to go through and, I guess, throw certain files out because it was, they were trying to censor things. There might have been, there might have been some things that were questionable and, morally or things like that. But it's like, you just don't do that because you've got a whole person, and that whole person is that's important. That so I'm glad that they've got.
Do you know why they took
everything.
Do you know why they took my papers? It wasn't because of the UFO stuff. Wasn't because I was a playwright, although that was all part of it. Okay. Everybody knows the term transgender, right? Back in the early 80s, there was an organization formed up. It was 13 of us. There's only 3 of us left alive from that group, called the International Foundation for Gender Education. It's based out of Boston. Okay. We coined that term. I was one of the 13 people to coin that term. We were doing television shows like People Are Talking and you name it. It was, I can't remember the guy who was all the talk show hosts, Donahue and Gary Collins and all the People Are Talking shows, all those guys, right? And basically what happened was every time we did one of those programs, and that was back when I was a boy person, and I would come on the show Femme, and in a commercial break, we'd go back and wash off all the makeup, come back out in a 3-piece suit, that kind of thing. But it was stupid, but it hammered the audience in a way that was necessary. But we had to use clinical terms when we first started doing it, cross-dresser and transsexual, and they were too clinical. So we said, we got to have a better term, something maybe like an umbrella term. And there was a lady on the board of the IFGE who was a medical doctor, and she says, well, why don't we use that trans aspect and it's called transgender, be a big umbrella, Wow. And that's how it got turned. So by us, there's about 6 of us that was out doing all these talk shows and everything. Mm-hmm. And by doing that, we got it into the lexicon. We even called a couple of the major dictionaries and explained to them what it was and everything. And over about 8 years, it got completely absorbed into the dictionaries, the thesaurus, all that kind of stuff.
Wow.
And that was what I was involved with. I was an early social activist for the trans community, and that's why New York State University took my papers.
Wow.
But they were delighted with the UFO books too. Please understand. They're waiting for more stuff from me because they know we're going to generate more stuff. Linda told you we're going to generate 80 books here very shortly, with individual state statistics right down to the zip code, and then that way it's not one big nasty. But we never could take the big book down to the city level because it would, if we did it for the whole United States, it would have been like 2 Oxford dictionaries. It would have been like 5,000 pages. We couldn't do that. So doing every single book, even California, we can do it in under 500 pages. So we said, okay, let's do individual states. We've got a template for how to do it. Most of it's cranking it out of Excel and that kind of thing, burning it into a PDF, and a little bit of narrative to go with it. And that's what we're going to generate. And then we're going to take all of the shapes and do the same thing. We're going to show you where all the shapes are. The maps, since we got zip codes, we can map them across the United States. And do you know that not every shape has been seen in every state?
Interesting.
Because we've plotted where they've been seen, by zip code. And there are 3,200 counties, and it was 3,170 of them reported UFOs in the 20 years. Okay, so it was like less than 80 counties of the 3,200 in the United States that didn't have a UFO report filed.
Wow. And let me ask you, because Utah, obviously, I'm a Utah girl, and it was very interesting to me when I was state director for MUFON. There were not a lot of cases that came into the database, and so, would that potentially be because of the amount of testing that we're doing here? Would there be a need to make sure that was kept quiet?
If somebody, okay, does Utah have good rural broadband? Probably not.
Questionable.
And we found out that rural broadband has a significant impact on whether just access to broadband has a significant effect on people being able to report what they see. That was something we correlated in this last book. We had the 5 drivers, and then we had like 4 influencers. It wasn't always a driver. 2 of them were brought up by Tom Conwell. There was the geological faults and the pollution patterns.
But would there be a need, though, if there was, we've got, like Dugway Proving Ground, we've got Utah Test and Training Range, we've got a lot of aerospace and defense
and the people who
contractors
work
here.
there probably have clearances and probably say, I probably shouldn't bother to do that. Oh, kids, don't you dare report that. I might lose my job. Honey, you work out there. I won't report it because you might lose your job. It's the same thing. Like, we're not going to talk about that kid that got the deformity because his house is built on a waste field of some sort. No, because they'll chase the chemical factory away, and that's Dad's job. That's what we're dealing with here. So if you've got all that stuff in Utah, it doesn't surprise me. Most of the reports come out of Salt Lake City anyway, the major population base, and you don't have good rural broadband.
Interesting. Okay, thank you. I thought all of this is so fascinating to me. And so, okay, you've got this wonderful, and I just have to show this again because I think it's amazing. Are you going to look up Utah?
No, if it's okay, I can.
Oh, it's okay.
Okay, here.
It's okay.
I'll give it to her. Find a Utah page. Okay, she's sitting right next to me where I was sitting before.
And I will say that she's relatively quiet.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I was noisy back there. I just found so much.
A polite one.
Yeah, I found so much of what you were talking about. Just a hoot.
Oh, that made me laugh. I just loved it. That just made my night.
Principal drivers for your audience: population. Everybody knee jerks on that, but population is a driver. Temperate weather is a driver. A warm state like Florida has more sightings than a place like Maine in the wintertime. Okay, leisure time. Usually that leisure time is in the evening, usually after 5 o'clock at night up to about 11:30 at night. After midnight, the numbers fall off like a rock. Okay, just like that. Okay. Hours of darkness. Again, it falls into that 8:30 at night to about 10:30 at night type of thing. And then observer access to broadband. These are principal drivers we've been able to correlate and track. Now, secondary influencers. Proximity to large bodies of water, proximity to toxic ecosystems, brown fields, dead oil fields, dead gas fields, dead mining towns, you name it. Burning coal mines. There's about 40 coal mines that have been on fire for decades, that type of thing. They can't put them out because the fires are worming all through the vein of coal. Okay, proximity to geological fault lines. This is a big deal. Tom really was amazed with that. High visibility media report. I put that in there. Yes, if there's a lot of stuff going on. I'll give you an example. April 16th, 2008. The average daily sighting in the United States around that time was about 22 sightings a day in the United States. On that particular day, there were 60. Okay. Wow. Now, we did a breakout report, and it was onesie-twosies with most of the states except Indiana. Indiana is a state that averaged maybe 1 sighting a week, maybe about 3 or 4 sightings a month. They had 25 that day. Okay. No, who knows about it? Because nobody reports this stuff in the news, right? Actually, it was actually reported locally. Big flap because 12 municipalities and 2 neighboring counties had these sightings. Okay. Almost nobody hears about it. Hey, these TV producers come to me. Hey, what do you got? And I give them this. They're not interested. Okay. It's stupid what they're not interested in because I've identified about 75 other places that had a one-day something or other happen and nobody's interested. Okay. So what happens is they had this stuff happen. And then there was more sightings filed with the reporting services, MUFON, New Fork. Okay. But was it those sightings, new sightings? No, people read it in newspaper. Well, maybe I should report the thing I saw 6 months or a year ago. And they almost always seem to be a flood of sighting reports by somebody doing it retroactively. Okay. And then there's this thing called the generational effect. And what that is California, Los Angeles County is the number one county, 3,200 counties in the United States. They're the number one county for UFO sightings. They have more sightings than 39 individual states. Maricopa County, Arizona, okay, Phoenix, they are the number 2 county, and they have more sightings than 36 individual states. And that's a big deal. Now, people say to me, what is that? We think there's a generational effect. People heard grandpa talk about the Battle of LA and they passed it down. And so there's this attitude, I'll look up, maybe I'll see something one of these days. Oh, mom and dad were talking about the Phoenix lights back in 97. Maybe if I look up regularly, I'll see something. And that's what the generational effect is. Now, Linda made a comment about how many people report them and don't report them. We got some metrics from 2 different polling agencies. One in 2017, one in 2019. We did crunch the numbers for every single state based on that number of 16% of people say, and U.S. adults say they've seen something. All right, crunched it back against sightings, which didn't even come close, because that 16% works out to about 42 to 45 million adult people in the United States. Break it down to some states, it was as little as 1 in 150 people, up over a bell curve, down the other side, 1 in 450 people. But the bulk of it at the top of the bell curve was about 1 in 225, 250 people reports what they see. Now, take a number like what's in Utah. What do we got in Utah? Utah. No. In the 20 years, Utah had 1,807 reported sightings. They averaged about 90 a year, about 7 a month, and about 1.74 a week, okay, and about 0.5 a day. Now, what's funny about that is if you take your handy calculator out and say 1,807 times 255, that gets there a better number, right? How about 460,785 just in Utah, based on that 1 in 250 people reports what they see? Now, I know that number sounds absurd, but you go into a diner, sit at the bar, and then have the waitress start talking to the waitress behind the bar and say, I read a column about UFOs, and everybody kind of looks at you strange. And then one by one, they creep up and do, I saw this thing a couple years ago. My mother saw this thing last year. My wife saw that thing last week. You know, everybody's seen one.
I know, it's just so, I mean, seriously, I love doing that. I mean, I love going to some of these teeny places and like just pulling up at a bar or pulling up at a burger joint. You know what I mean? Because sometimes when you're at a bar and people are, you know, drinking and things, you hear some interesting stories. But, you know, I mean, it's fun to just, you know, just go into those environments and to talk to people and to, you know, and even in...
Once they feel comfortable, they'll own up and tell you their story, their cousin's story, won't they?
Well, yes. And I mean, I love like when people come to take Pilates from me, it's like, you know, here they walk in and I've got a, you know, 4,000 square foot studio, but like, you know, over here is where I'm teaching Pilates and they come in and they're like, okay, you've got little aliens behind over here. We've got, okay, wow. It's, you know, it takes a minute to kind of process the environment you come into when you think you're doing Pilates. And then it's like, aliens. And it's like, I, you know, try to warm people up and just different things, but it is amazing. It's like just to talk about just, I mean, okay, so have you ever had anything happen that was unusual? You know what, I mean, some of the people that tell me things, I mean, I've had people that have walked into the studio who've lived with, you know, they were best friends with the Sherman's family at Skinwalker Ranch, or, you know, you've got, I mean, a person that, I mean, just crazy that worked, you know, her father worked at Dugway and saw UFOs, you know, and just crazy stuff. But you're right, it's like everybody in a weird way has a story, whether, you know, the story is, you know, I mean, whether it's accurate, whether it really happened, who knows, but I love hearing stories. And so I have to ask you too, because the more I've learned about UFOs and things, misidentifications are, you know, I mean, we misidentify things all the time. And I think
ask any cop. 10 people saw the wreck, and there's 9 different stories.
Right, right. But I mean, how much of a factor does that play into things in your research?
Okay, actually, we just take the shapes, what shapes they say they saw at face value. Okay, but you take a situation where there was a day. You got that? Okay. You take a day like that day in Indiana, April 16, 2008. Okay, 25 sightings, and a third of them were the same shape, but different people look at the shape and call it something else. Was it a saucer? Was it a saucer and they saw it from the bottom side, and it looked like a circle, some people thought it was a sphere, whatever, so you have to take the shapes at face value based on most people are not trained observers. Okay. But we just rack them up, and we just rack up the numbers and the date and try to correlate to dates. And what I've been trying to get people to pay attention, particularly some of these documentary people who come to you and want you to be, come on, talk about UFOs. And I don't have case studies, but I can show you 50 to 75 places in the United States over the last 20 years. Oh, they always ask the question, before I finish that thought, they always ask the question, where's the hot spot? And I always have to say, for a particular shape, for a particular location, particular year, particular month or season. Some of these shapes have seasons, you know that?
Interesting.
And they say, what? I said, yeah, some you only see them in the wintertime. Sometimes some you only see in the summertime, some of them show up more in the spring, people look at me strange when I say that. And he says, guys, I got the data. You want to see the chart, And it blows their socks off, when you tell them these things have seasons. Hey, I blew George Knapp's socks off, and I told him they have seasons, and so it's crazy stuff. But you have to kind of step back from it and say, well, that's what the data is. I can't explain it. I'm just telling you that's what the data is.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Wow.
It's crazy.
Wow, that is so cool. And I just commend both of you for doing what you've done. I think it is fascinating, and I want to get both of you on because we're going to wrap up the show. Yeah, get a little close to you, honey. That's right. So I want to, I think the three of us have been kindred spirits in a lot of ways because, the three of us have experienced a lot of blowback in the field and at the hands of, trolls, people that, there could be, who knows what's going on, but I want to ask each of you, how has that affected you when you are harassed because of the choices that you make proudly because of something that shouldn't be anybody's business, things that it's just, to me, I think you're very brave for coming forward and doing all the work that you've done to make people acceptable, to make, it's not okay, I think, to see what has happened.
We have two things that we noticed up front. Because I was the mouthpiece a lot of the time. Okay. Linda's got the real science degrees. I got the arts and entertainment hat and cane, that type of thing. And so there's that. But there are times that people used to look back and just look at Linda. Oh, she's just the little lady behind. She's the wife. And I keep trying to tell people she's the bloody brains of this operation, and they don't get that. I'm just doing the intelligence work here, so there's that. I've given presentations at local clubs that were videotaped and then put up on YouTube or something like this, and you'd go back and look at the YouTube stream, and there'd be this comment stream going up one side, and there'd be this faction of people saying that person doesn't know what it is. How can we trust that commentary is how can we trust that person's statistics if it doesn't know what gender it is?
Oh my God.
And the attitude I take these days when people pull that stunt on me, and they still do, I say, I know exactly what I am. You don't know what I am.
Good for you. And I know because, we've had conversations over the years, and I've seen some of your social media posts. And I mean, there have been times, I think, when all of us have just, been like this close to saying, this is enough. Why bother? And it is really disheartening to see how many detractors and haters are just people that are bored and clearly need to buy a big truck. I don't know what. Get over it.
Well, there have been people at some of these conferences that have given me crap, and they were bigger than I was, and that type of thing, And
Really?
yeah, one of them was at an international UFO conference. Actually, I had two of them that one weekend. In fact, it was the weekend I won Researcher of the Year, and I'm going to both refer to both these guys as a couple of big bubbas. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And the one guy, I stepped into an alcove to get some water out of the drinking fountain, and he cornered me in there. Now, here I am in a situation where I'm getting very, very scared. I'm getting this close to punching this guy. And then I realize I'm in Arizona, and if I punch this guy, I'm the one that's going to go to jail. Okay. So I can't do anything but basically take my first step that I can as soon as the guy turns the wrong way and get out and get away from it. I've had a couple of bad incidents like that. The lady, Linda Cortell, the one who had the abduction stuff back in the 60s, no, not 60s, 80s. And was levitated out of a building and sucked up in the machine, and people from the UN saw her levitated, that kind of thing. She was at a UFO conference, and some guys tried to abduct her into a van, said they were a television crew, and they tried to abduct her. Okay. I hate to think how that would have worked out if she'd gotten in that truck, So there's been a lot of creeps in this community that have threatened legitimate speakers, and for whatever reason they wanted to threaten us. Linda, your thought?
Well, my favorite story about that is that we were at UFORC and at the table, and this man came up and pounded on the table and says, "Did you have a man check these numbers?" Literally.
Of course.
I witnessed it.
And what was fun about it was there was two people who know me, and you probably know their names, okay, sitting at their tables. And I simply looked at the guy. They heard this guy pounding on the book. And I said, "No, but I got one home in a jar."
I just try to be. I'm a Buddhist, okay, and
we both are technically.
Both are, and so I'm doing this. Part of this is my fulfillment of trying to be a good Buddhist by being an authentic self and being honest with myself and with others. And so a lot of these people, sometimes it's also she keeps me on a very short leash sometimes. So because I would attack them with I have very sharp wit when I want to use it, and I just try to be compassionate towards them. And think that, especially like our work with the numbers, we are scaring the hell out of a lot of people. Because it's one thing to say, "Oh yeah, well, there was this, crash back in 47 in Roswell," and quite another to say, "Yeah, last month there were 50 sightings in your neighborhood." It's underneath all of this is fear. It's fear of the numbers. It's fear that, the women the queer people are coming in and elbowing us out of our star role as our deserved, entitled role as being the top UFO spokesperson.
King of the nerds.
Yeah. They're not men, and they're women.
That we have nothing to contribute because we're queer,
And we're old ladies,
too.
I was fairly attractive when I was young, but
seriously?
I'm not young anymore.
She's a looker, Yeah. Me, I had to have a glamour shot to look like that, but
Yeah, so but that's part of being a Buddhist, is that I try not to indulge my vanity, and that if these guys are that superficial that I mean, one of the famous UFO researchers, we were at a conference with a woman, and she was like, "Oh yeah, I'm back on Weight Watchers because you got to be thin to be accepted as a woman, And you're obviously young and beautiful, but that might not always be that way. So you want to be admired for your brain and what's inside. Just like one of the lines she uses when people give her hard times is, "If you can't deal with me, how are you going to deal with ET?"
In fact, I did that with the 2019 talks. I added 5 extra slides because I just looked at one of these YouTube things where people say you don't know what the hell you are.
She was very upset.
I was very upset about it. I added 5 slides at the beginning of the presentation. It was a title slide, then a picture of the two of us as the researchers, and then I showed stepping slides of what I looked like in the military. In the Navy picture, I had a big bushy ball bunion beard, for God's sakes, and then followed by the third picture, which is this gorgeous glamour shot, and I showed a picture of us jumping over a broom, and I said, "Now, we're UFO researchers. Oh yeah, and we happen to be gay. By the way, if you can't deal with us, you'll never deal with ET." Now, I was in Laughlin, Nevada, and I thought, I'm waiting to get stoned on the stage, I had a 600 people standing ovation.
Nice.
And
so there's hope.
There's hope. Most of the other places
Praise the Lord.
It went well, But I had, by confronting it up front in my presentation, I didn't get any of the normal harassment I used to get in the hallways or during a meal or things like that. I just said, I'm not going to take any crap,
And that's the thing that I think people don't, necessarily understand. I mean, I know and I've talked about this over the years, being a woman and having, being stalked and being threatened and being bullied. And I mean, just some of these things that I've gone through, and people know where I live and where I work and, all of these things. And it's just like, it's really frightening. There have been situations where I have been at conferences and it's like, okay, can you please tell me where the security is? I'm not making this up, but I am, if I'm not, if I'm there by myself, that is very disconcerting. And so I think people who aren't immersed in all of this don't have an understanding of what that can be like. And I think especially because we see so many, there's a lot of hate, there's a lot of racism, there's a lot of bad behavior. And I think that unfortunately people in the UFO community who should be taking the lead to promote ethical behavior, to promote, transparency, to promote, kindness and empathy. We're lacking that in the leadership in the UFO community. And over the years, I've approached each of these individual researchers and I've just said, well, how, we've got this problem. What are we going to do to make a change? And everybody's like, oh, it's the way it's always been. And I just think, you lazy son of a bugger. Yeah. If we just roll over, that's the way it's always going to be. That means you don't have to take responsibility. You don't have to put yourself out there. You don't have to make a change for a younger generation who's coming into this. And I think that's really critical. We have to work together. We have to stand up. We have to call things out when people are behaving badly and using a subject that should be really exciting and empowering for each of us. We have to
think, yeah.
Yes, yeah. We have to just be willing.
In 2019, when I was doing all those kinds of presentations, I had one guy come up to me in the hallway, a talk or two after mine. He says, "Costa, I think you're crazy." I said, "What?" This is a bad place to call somebody crazy, And he says, "You went through a sex change. You must be nuts." And I said, "Whoa, whoa, 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 whoa. My employer at that time was IBM Federal Systems, sent me through a full set of psychologicals at Hopkins. Later, to keep my clearance while working for them, the Department of Defense sent me through a full set of psychologicals, and I kept my clearance because both tests came back and said a perfectly healthy woman took this test." So I did the same thing for myself. You may not jive with it, but I did the right thing.
I think it comes down to, my theory of everything is that the war that's going on right now is the war between the sexes. And just like money, it's almost at the bottom of anything. And the thing that disturbs like men the most about her is she gave up her white male privilege, and they can't understand that. Why would you do that? And because that's the most precious thing that they have. And so it's just like, well, if she's crazy enough to do that, anything else must be, of course, my answer to that always is, and what are your qualifications to diagnose what crazy is? Do you have a psychiatric degree? Are you a certified psychologist, a social worker? What DSM-3 or 5, category would you diagnose her as? So it's just, everybody throws away around the world crazy. Crazy is anything they don't agree with.
Your mic's off.
Ed, okay, I made it 2 hours.
Yeah.
I'm so proud of myself. Yes,
You did good. You did good considering how sick you were earlier today.
I know. Seriously,
I'm proud of you.
Thank you. I am awaiting the COVID results for my test today, and I've been feeling pretty crummy this week. So I was just like, okay, I can't do the show. And then I'm just like, no, I need to do it. And I do feel better. And it's been so much fun to talk with both of you and to see both of you, and to know that you've done incredible things, and you've been very brave, and we need more of that. You're an inspiration, and that is really, really important. I know Scott, who's in chat, and he's over in Ireland, which I want to come over there, and I just love Ireland, and thank you for your donations. But he's just like, gosh, this is such a toxic field. I don't know if I want to stay in that. And then, trust me, it is. And Phil, Leach, who's in chat, just said, stick with it. There are wonderful things. There are, it's an incredibly, deep and wonderful topic that in a lot of ways has enriched me. And for me, when I do my show, and I've done it for God, I've over 7 years probably now, every Friday, except for maybe a couple, I try to shine a light on things that I feel we deserve to know, things that lead us in the wrong path. And at the end of the day, there is something wonderful and exciting, about it. And so I'm showing you the landmines. Don't step where I've stepped. Because it's, I'm taking one for the team. I'm taking one for you guys, so you don't make the mistakes that I've made. And I do think it's fun, and I've got an incredible community here that we have created with UFO Classified. I'm very proud of that. And I'm just to see people in chat who I love. I've never met them face to face, but it's like we're a team. We're doing this together. We are making a difference. We're shining a light on things. We're logical enough to understand that there is, there is a level of corruption or people that are delusional, that are trying to steer the narrative, and there's disinformation and all of these things. But we're here, and we're respectful, and we truly care about each other. And I'm really proud. I'm proud of this show, and I'm proud to know all of you. I'm not just saying that, but I feel very lucky to have all of you supporting the show, and me, and Cheryl and Linda. And I just think it's, it's pretty cool. At the end of the day, this is why I'm here. Yeah. And that's a beautiful thing.
There's no better reason to do it, believe me. You're shining a good light on it, and believe me, do it. That's why I'm doing the one on the mysticism. I'm trying to shine a positive light on it.
Good. And even though sometimes I do hide in my closet for days on end.
We all do a lot of that lately.
Yeah.
I know. I've got to. Yeah, no, it's good, but it's interesting. But
the trick was, did you lose the weight you gained during the lockdown?
Not so much. Now that I'm really trying, and it's all good. I'm not eating a bunch of German food now, so that's good. Eliminating sausages from your diet is a fabulous thing. But anyway, thank you so much, both of you, for being here. It's been a delightful show, and I appreciate it. And I would encourage everyone to get this beautiful pink book, UFO
Go to
sightings.
Amazon.
Best
Cheryl,
preference.
go to book. Go look up Cheryl Costa. Cheryl with a C, Costa with a C, and you'll get just and say UFO, and you'll get the 3 books. The pink one's the one you want.
Absolutely. And thank you very much and best of luck.
Thank
We
you.
will be in touch. You guys rock, be safe. And, you know, if anybody gives you any crap, you let me, even though you guys can take care of yourselves, but you know, I'm feeling pretty spicy. So, you know, we can
Okay.
take on the world. So thank you guys. Stay safe. And I love you guys. Thank you for contributing to UFO Classified and making this show, in my opinion, a wonderful show. Thanks, you guys.
Thank you for having us as
Absolutely.
always.
Good
Bye
night.
bye now.
Take care.